Very good afternoon. Welcome to the webinar. My name is Kath Smith. I'm going to be talking to you today about feeding, particularly setting up different feeding regimes. If this is your first webinar with us, then very warm welcome to you. If you're old school at this, then apologies, just the next couple of slides, just want to explain how the webinar itself works. So just sit back and relax if you already know this. You'll see on your screen, you've got a question pane or a control panel really. If you want to ask a question at any time through the presentation, you can type that in. Now I know typing questions can be a bit laborious if you're trying to listen to it at the same time, so don't feel you have to type the entire message through. We also have a raise your hand option. So there's a little hand button on there. You can just press that at any time. Now I don't look at those throughout the presentation itself. I leave them to the very end, so they will stay lit up, and then I can come to you. You can then ask your question directly if that works for you. So hopefully that'll all explain that. And the questions can be related to this topic or indeed anything else on uniform at all as well. Okay, got a question through already, but I'll come to that in a bit. Thank you. Right, so without further ado, let's go into the program. Okay, so feeding. Now this can be done through feeding in uniform that then links to a parlour system or a robot. There is also the option for using the milk recording data for a feeding ration. Now approach this one with caution, because obviously the milk recording is only done once a month, so depending on if you have a bad recording, your data then, if you're feeding to yield, would be affected. But you can also do things like fixed feeding as well, so that would work also. For everything that I'm about to do, just a little caveat here, I'm no nutritionist at all. We can show you the data, show you how to put it in, but as with anything, do seek advice from your feed consultant or nutritionist in order to get the right data for you. Okay, probably the most common question I'm asked is, what does everybody else do when setting up a ration? But it is all different depending on your management, of course. So the very first thing we need to do is to put your cows into groups if you wish to feed by different group settings. That's done in number one. There's a couple of places you can do this actually, but just want to show you one, daily tasks, and then number 11, animal grouping. And your groups will have come across from your parlour system in any case if you've got that link set up, so you may not need to tweak too much in here, and the settings changed in here can then go back to the parlour, but again check with us depending on what setup you've got there. But if it's very much standalone, you'll see this one's already got groups in, so this would be current, and it's just a case of going through individually. I'll just do it down here because I've got a control panel in the way. So for cow 19, she's currently in the lows. We can change her into the high yielders or whatever group's appropriate. Now this list of groups is a default list. So before you even get that far, you might want to change your group names. That's done in manage groups, and you can see there we've got groups here. We also have barn groups, so for everything today, feed-wise, it will always be a group as opposed to a barn group, so that's separate again. You can edit the name of a particular group by clicking on it and then edit there. We'll take it out completely. And you can also add a new group if you want to, if you've got more than 11 in actual fact, so you can keep going with those. Okay, the other bit as well, just to mention on groupings, in the settings button, you can set up certain bits of automation to make that easier. So for example, a new group after calving, we can go into the post calvers or the highs, whichever is appropriate, and at drying off, put them into the dries as well. So that usually covers most bases. There's other young stock groups as well for other different bits and pieces there. Okay. So we always do the feeding in a certain order. We go to our cow head, we go to number 8, and then feeding setup number 1. So 8.1 is your first port of call. Now some of this on this demo herd I've got here, it has been set up already. I didn't want to start completely from scratch, but I will talk you through the steps as though we're going to. Okay, just be a bit laborious watching me type everything in. So having got our cows in the right groups, we want to set up the increase decrease first of all. So that's this button here. Now this is akin to your target feeding. If you were looking at a different program, that might be familiar to you. So it's before your cows are feeding to yield, you want to set them up by days to get them a good start before they then go on to their feed to yield. And also the decrease side of it is to do with cows coming up for drying off. So we want to gently trickle down the amount of cake that they're having before they're dry. A lot of these have a little warning on, so just be checking what you're about to do. Please do call us if you want any help with this whatsoever. I would encourage you to do so. Even if you think you've got the system right, we can just check it over for you, make sure it's all working fine. Okay, so there we go. Right, so this particular setup has a feed 1 and a feed 2, just to complicate matters. So normally you'd be starting with feed 1, and you'll see there are different sections in here. So we've got first calvers, and I can actually just hide that out of the way just to see how it works. Bring it back in. We've got second calvers, and then we've got cows. So those are anything above 2. And you've got different aspects of it. So before calving would generally apply if you're training for robots, so you might want the cows to start coming in to get a feel for it. We've then got after calving, first phase, and so on, and then before drying off. So all you're going to be putting into here is your first period. So at 7 days, we want them to have 1 kilo of cake to start with, moving up to 3. And as you put the figures in, see if I change this to 4, it does automatically trail on to the next area. Okay, I'm going to put it back to 3 just so my figures are the same. So that all links through together. And you'll also notice that as you change your period settings, so 7 days and then another 14 days, those will be replicated in the other groups as well. So all you've got to worry about really is, what are my time frames? So am I building it up weekly or every couple of weeks up to a certain point? And how much cake are we going from calving right up to that time frame? Now, the important point here, if you remember nothing else, please take note to look at the graph. So the graph will tell you exactly what you're putting in. It's always good to look at a picture rather than some words, and you can actually see then, what is my setup? Have I put what I wanted to in the grid? So it certainly does help. So we've got heifers here, and we've got second calvers and cows, just in case they're doing anything different. So some of mine have got the sort of pre-calving block here, and then we're starting in 7 days on feeding 3, so that's what we saw on the grid. After a further 14 days, so 21, we're going up to 6 for the heifers, 7 for second calvers, and 8. So if I go back here, there's my 6, 7, and 8 further down there. So that all ties in. That's exactly what I wanted to happen. Okay, so if you imagine this, I'll just go back to the graph so you can study that for a moment. This is my from calving up to, in fact, for this one, 51 days. But again, yours could be different. Could be 3 weeks, could be 4 weeks, could be 60 days. There's then a gap, and that's deliberate because we're only setting up our target feed before we start to feed to yield. And then we're kicking in on the decrease where this amount is unknown. So cows could be starting this phase at different levels, of course, depending on how much they've been milking. We're coming down to 2 weeks before calving, no cake at all. So we want to sort of change it down. And there's a regulation in here. We're not going to drop like a stone on one day. So you'll see that setting later on. Okay, so if I go back to my grid, you can see before drying off, 7 days before, the question mark, and if you hover the mouse over a lot of these boxes, it will explain what we're looking at, going down to 0. So that does look steep, but be reassured that it will be a gradual process. Okay, so that's our increase, decrease. That's the first thing. Click OK. We've checked the graph, so that's all good. We then want to go to our Ration type. And you can see again here, we've already got one in. So I'll just show you if I go to new. This is the type of scenario you're faced with. So today's is all about an M+ system. and we would click that, and then we would give it a name. And you've also got on here fixed curves, so you could just run your feeding curve exactly the same for everybody on there. Okay, if I just go to next, just to show you, it just confirms what you're about to do. Okay, but I'm going to use my one that I've already got. You can give your feed curve a name, so you can have a winter ration or a summer ration, exactly as you want there. Okay. So the one I've already got, if I go into here, double click, we've got our description, we go to next. So this table, we're just confirming, again, it's already built in. So some of yours, you will see blanks on here. Ignore basic ration. We're going to concentrate on the concentrate, literally. So here, again, I've got 2 feed types, so yours may just be the 1 feed. So these boxes open up, you can actually change them. Actually, it's the code, beg pardon, there, that's the one. So that's our list of feeds. If you haven't got exactly the right description, you can change that in the feed file, which is in the feeding section. I'll show you that later. So we're just confirming our feed type. These figures don't need filling in, they're already built into the system. Then we go to next, and then we've got this table. So this is the bit that people might get slightly confused by. Again, mine is already filled in. So what I've got is a base rate. So you'll see the word base there. Again, we've got first calvers, second calvers, and cows older than that. And your base figures are your M plus ration. So your amount of milk, that you're allowing for outside. So we've got 15 litres here for first calvers. I've put in 16 and 18 there. Okay, so that's our base position. So any cow yielding below that will get the minimum amount of cake. And again, that's going to be on a separate screen in a minute. Then all we do here is add a line. So you see there's an add button down the bottom. We're inserting a row. And the 10 is purely adding 10 to the figure above. So you type in 10, you don't have to use 10, of course, but it's just another level really. So 10 becomes 25. If I just move the mouse, actually you can see the figures there. So I'm adding 10 to my 15. This is a 25 litre cow, 26 litre cow, and 28. And then at this point, we can introduce our feeding rate per litre of milk. So 0.4 kilos of cake. So I've just keyed that in across the board as well. Again, concentrate A and B for this one, but yours will usually invariably just be 1 feed type. Then I've gone up another 10, so a 35 litre cow, still on this 0.4 per litre. And then we've just increased it slightly to cover the top end. So again, seek advice on your feed levels for these. And also very important, check the graph. Okay, and you'll know straight away from the graph if you've got the right figures in or not. So it's really, really useful to check. So here we go. We've got concentrate A, first calvers, 15 litres is our base point. So they don't necessarily get nothing at all, as you will see later. A 25 litre cow is going to get 4 kilos of cake, and so on. So once you put the graph in, of course, you can always put figures in and tweak it. So just have a play, check that it's right on the graph, and then you're done. So we're happy with that. We can always go back to the table. You can change those figures absolutely. Check your graph again. So the graph will change instantly. There's nothing to save. Once you're completely happy, then you finish. Okay, the next thing is to go to our herd settings. And again, we've got a little warning, so just make sure you know what you're setting up. And this should be okay, really, but it's just a case of checking it to make it really make sure it's really specific for you. So what we're looking for in here is a 7-day average. So certainly with as I say, with a parlor link or robot link, 7-day average milk yield is the usual one for feeding 2. There is a setting here: do not use milk yields with a negative deviation of more than a percentage. So if the milk suddenly shoots down, we're not going to use that in our calculations. So you can choose what percentage you want there. The other important one here is this FPCM, fat protein corrected milk. We don't use that as a rule. So no calculation of fat and protein. Just make sure that's set there. And the other boxes, again, these are defaults, but you might want to tweak if we haven't got an actual milk yield. And don't forget, it's a 7-day average, so that cow would have to be absent for a fair time for it to be unknown. But you can use default figures here to apply to an animal that might not be there. I'll come on to absent cows as well in a minute, because we can cater for those separately as well. This top bit here, additions for condition, you can actually feed based on condition score as well. The additions one, I'll just show you that. It's not actually used, but I think it's if you want to add certain feed amounts for, as you can see, by days or whatever, but we don't tend to use that at all. Okay. Next bit then, calculated feed. So here we need to do one group at a time. That's the recommendation. You can tick your box. So I'm going to do group 2, my high yielders. Check they've got the right ration in. So this one again is a drop-down option. And another important feature, don't use the calculate all. So just do calculate at this point. Check which group you've got. Click on calculate. There we go. Sorry, mouse is a bit quiet there. There we go. Right, so this one is important as well. This is the minimum maximum we were talking about. If we want cows to have at least something in the parlour while they're eating rather than nothing at all, we've got minimum concentrate cows, and again A and B if applicable, so I've got 1 in there. Maximum for cows of 8, minimum for heifers, and maximum there. So fill in these boxes and then check your maximum increase decrease. So these are the ones that are coming down to drying off. We don't want a big drop, as I was saying. We want it to be a gradual decrease. So in here I've got 0.2 kilos, might be 0.5, probably no more than that I would suggest, but again, you know, talk to your advisor. And increase, I've got 1 kilo, but you might want to keep them the same, so it's a gradual increase if they're on feed curve as well. So entirely up to you there. Okay, we go to next, and that's it. We're good to go. We click finish, and that will calculate a revised ration for the cows in that particular group. So what are we looking at here? We've got our group 2, so we know which group we're looking at. All the cows in that group are listed along with their status and days in milk. Now you've got a figure here. Ignore the heading, it's a bit misleading really, because I did say we're not using fat corrected milk, and we're not, but that's your 7-day average milk yield. Advice, anything advice wise, is our recommended ration. So that's what we've just calculated. And the allocation, the blue, is what you've actually feeding currently. So you might well find there's differences. Generally speaking, your totals don't tend to vary too much. You know, a ration is a ration at the end of the day, however you put it in. You can see then if there are differences, and if I hover the mouse, limited by maximum allocation. So 8 is our top feed amount. She's not going to go any more over that. If I look down here, we've got a total. So your total cake per day recommended would be 1371. We're actually feeding 1132. So some cows need to be stepped up a bit. And again, with the maximum increase per day, they're only going to go up 1 kilo a day. Okay, some of them have comments. So these, you can pretty much work out what they are. Phasing in, so this is a cow coming in to feed to yield, so she's not yet got to that position. Let's just see if there's any others. Yes, we've got a couple of other early ones, and you can work it out as well with the days in milk on here. So it might be, as you perhaps examine individual cows, you can always go and have a look at an individual record. If I go back up to the top, so cow number 2, as with all things uniform, you can go straight into it from here, which is quite handy actually. Now there's 2 things here. So we've got, it takes us straight to the feed section, and you can see there's her allocated and there's her advice in there. Now before I have a look at this scenario, what I'm going to do here is go back to my calculated feed. I forgot to do this earlier as well, and close that screen, and then it will prompt me to save changes. So I'll say yes to that one. Sending data to the process computer, so this will kick in, which is probably what you want it to do anyway. So as soon as you've made your ration changes, they will be applied to your process computer, which is then your parlour or your robot, whatever you're feeding on the other end. So you would say yes to that one. Now looking at cow number 2, I can edit and see the feed amounts in this table here. Drawing your attention to bonus. So you can add a bonus to a particular cow. Once you've done the calculation, you can top her up with some extra. It's only it's a fixed bonus in that it won't disappear, so you do need to take it off at the end. You can also adjust the actual feed ration. If you have a sick cow, for example, so her feed to yield, her yield's dropping rather quickly, so her feed will naturally follow the same pattern, and it might be we need to keep her at a fixed level. So in that case, we go to General tab and we change her from feed to individual. Then go to your feed amount, and then you can adjust her allocation. So we can put that as a fixed amount. So if I'll just make that 6 just for differencing there. Close out of this one. Go back to calculated feed, which I've closed down. Back to group 2. Calculate. Right, it does take to this screen again, but it's all filled in, so that's fine. We just go to next, finish again. That should say 6, but it doesn't. Okay, I think it might be, hang on, if I go back to her. Allocated 6, yeah, so it's in there. I may have needed to refresh a bit more. Oh, it's gone back to there, that's possibly why. Edit. Close. Next. Okay, recalculate again. Okay, that's me doing something wrong there. But in any case, you can change the cow individual ration so she doesn't follow the feed curve. The important thing is to put it back, of course, once she's back on track and following the curve again. So the other bits I just wanted to follow through were after you've done all your calculating, we go back to cow head. We have in our feeding area, feed file, I was talking about when you've got different feed types. So this is the examples given. So you can actually add new types to here. I mean, concentrate should be in there anyway, so that'll probably cover most feeding. You can also purchase feed in if you want to. And calculated feeds, you can go back in there and view. That's exactly the same area as we were in before here. Back on the dashboard, there is a new feature now for silo levels. So this will only work if you have feed intake coming back into uniform from your parlour system. So certain systems do that, others don't. So do check with us to find out if your system is compatible. But in the KPIs here, we can go right down to the bottom and you've got silo indication. So you can actually apply that one. I'll just take some other stuff off a second, just to give it a bit more room. Now there's nothing in there, but that can be populated. I think with this demo herd, actually, we haven't got the feed intake. You will see it if you go to number 8, you'll have a feed intake option here. You can then basically buy in the amount in your silo currently. You can also have a warning level on there. And then of course, because your feed intake is coming back, the program knows how much cake has been eaten, and then it will adjust the silo level. So you'll end up with a little graphic on here to show you what is actually left in the silo. And it will go to red when it gets below whatever criteria you set. Okay, so ready for any questions now. I think there are a couple coming in as I did my presentation. So feel free to write. I'll give you a minute to do to do that. Oh yeah, straight in from Karen. Where can I see the total amount fed during one milking? So back on your one milking, yeah, per day we've got it on here. I would think that will be, let me go back, we go to our daily yields. Yeah, so again, I'm missing that one on the demo herd here, but in the daily yields, I'm pretty sure you've got a column feed there as well, and that would give you the milking criteria. But I'll check that one, Karen, and come back to you just to be really precise. Thank you. Daily feed. Okay, any other questions, or if you want to raise your hand, that's easier. No, all looking good there. Okay, well, that's brilliant. Thank you all very much for attending. I'll just scan through one more time, just in case somebody's frantically typing. Oh yes, we've got one from Gareth. Gareth, I can't unmute you, so I don't know if you want to type your question in, or if you can unmute yourself, that would be brilliant if you want to ask your question directly. Or if it's easier, you can email me afterwards. Okay, so just before I go, I just want to go back to my PowerPoint a minute. We do record all of these presentations, and you may not see any there at the minute, but we are looking to put all of the webinar recordings on the website under software. So find that software at the top, nmr.co.uk, under training and then webinars. Any future events are also posted on the website. So if you miss an email from me, it'll be on the events page. So again, news and events. If you have registered for a webinar, the general gist is if you register, you're automatically included in the email which will send you the recording. So if you can't make it on the day, absolutely fine, but the registration is quite important for that to happen. I've also got a YouTube channel, so we put all of our different recordings on there, so do have a browse on that one. And if you're not already aware, hopefully you've all been invited and contacted personally, but the uniform workshops are in full swing now. So I'll just leave that on the screen for a little minute. Those are the next ones coming up. And I've had a few already, which have been very well attended and really useful, actually. The theme this year is back to basics. So there's lots of little tips on different things of, different settings you can check, which you might well have been shown right at the start, but it's just a nice refresher to see everything set up specifically for you. Okay. That's brilliant. Well, thank you all very much for listening. If you do have any further questions, please do drop me an email or any suggestions for future webinars. I've got some pointers from the previous one I did. So that's already sort of booked in probably for February now. And I've just seen Gareth has typed his question in. Excellent. Oh yeah, so the columns on the feeding, we've got, let me come back to the program. It does tell you on the headings actually. So if we go back to, that was already open, isn't it? Calculated feed. There we go. So yellow is advice, that's the recommendation based on the calculations we've just done. Allocation is what she's having now. So depending on when you're putting this in, if you're starting completely from scratch and you don't have a parlor link, your current allocation would be 0. And then the advice is the new one that it will go up to once that's applied. Okay. Brilliant. Thank you all very much indeed. Have a good afternoon.